Hey guys, I'm James Renick from Renick Performance. Today we're going to do a install video on the equal length cold air intake and catch can kit for the 2016 Plus ATS-V. Let's get to it. Alright, so step one is going to be putting a reducing coupler onto the snout of the turbocharger. This step is going to be the same both on the driver and the passenger side. Today we're going to start on the driver's side and use that as the example. When you put your coupler onto the snout, you want to make sure that the coupler has a little bit of a raised edge. So as it gets towards the knurl, you want to push it on there. The overall dimension side of the snout is not going to be the same as any of the off-the-shelf couplers. So when you put your band clamp on, make sure it's very tight so it doesn't pull off. The next step is going to be the intermediate pipe to the coupler. Just like the lower T-bolt clamp, you want to keep this one in a position that you can gain access to it with a socket and an extension later on in the install. Keep this one loose so you can clock, move, and put this pipe in the position that best suits the fitment from all the pipes moving into the heat shield. So let's go ahead and get this system installed. After you have your intermediate pipes installed, you're going to need to connect your blow-off valve hose from the blow-off valve to the intermediate pipe. One step that's going to make this easier for you is taking the foot that holds the hose and pulling it out. This little foot needs to be pulled with a set of dikes and it will come right off. The reason that you do this is to gain access to different clocking and positions with this hose clamp. 99% of the time, this is not in a position where you can gain access to it with regular tools. You're going to probably need to put them in the opposite position so then you can gain access with a flathead screwdriver. Let's move on to the next step. The next step after getting your intermediate pipes and blow-off valve hoses loosely in place is going to be the catch can. The catch can is going to go down between the radiator shroud and the engine in an OEM location with OEM hardware. We will illustrate this later on. First thing is that you're going to have to route these lines with these custom bungs to the proper location to the PCVs. Next, the AND fittings that are already pre-clocked may need to be adjusted. So with an AND wrench, you can put them in the position that is best to your liking. Once you have them set in place, you can trim each hose to your liking and then permanently clamp them to each AND bung. Let's go ahead and get this installed. The next step is going to be hanging the catch can. Once you have the bolt in place, hand tighten the nut on the bottom until you can't tighten it anymore. Come back with either a set of wrenches or a ratchet and wrench and lock it into the desired position. Be in mind that there is a rubber grommet that sits in the center of it in order to alleviate vibration. You're going to need to really put a lot of PSI on this to make sure that it doesn't move back and forth as the car vibrates and moves around. Let's move on to the next step. The next step is going to be threading one of the OEM M8 bolts back into the block to hold your intermediate pipe. If you remember from taking out the OEM air box, there is a PCV crossbar, this bar, with two M8 bolts that look like this. You're going to retain and reuse one of these bolts. Make sure that you apply blue Loctite or another type of Loctite adherent to the bolt to keep it sturdy and in place. Once you have the bolt pre-threaded, like it is now, position the bolt with the feet somewhere in between so it's about even playing field with the engine cover or engine shroud. Then, with a short 10mm wrench, go ahead and tighten it into place. This next step is going to be just like the previous one. You're going to pre-thread this M8 bolt into the block. Make sure you put blue Loctite or another type of soft Loctite onto this bolt to make sure it doesn't back out. Mattering on how big your hands are, you may do this ahead of time or you may do this after you get the feet in position with the pipe in place. Our next step is going to be installing some of the heat shield components Make sure to take out the rubber grommet that sits on the OEM intake box. Sometimes it comes out with the intake box, sometimes it stays in the hole. Make sure this comes out or your heat shield won't fit correctly. Remember, we're putting in the heat shield in order to line up the intake tubes. So you don't need to put on any of the serrated nuts to make it sit permanently. Just get it in here nice and flush and leave it as is. Next, we're going to be installing our final sets of pipes. Although you can't see this, we're going to go ahead and put the bolt we just talked about in a previous step. I'm going to be threading it on now just to show you a different process. You have to do it all by feel. You can't see the feet or where the bolt's going in place. Be careful not to drop this down in the underpan. Like previously stated, we kept the clamp on the intermediate loose. These clamps are also finger tight. Now that you have the bolt in place, you can move this around as needed. Our main goal is going to be to get it to sit flush here inside the hole, and then position the intermediate pipe so it doesn't rub your heat shield. It takes a little bit of fitment, a little bit of play. Once you find the desired location that you want your intake in, once it's centered inside of the intake hole, hold it in place, and with an M12 short wrench, reach underneath and start your tightening process. As you tighten it, it will want to bring the pipe up, so make sure you hold it in place so it doesn't come out of position. The next step is going to be cutting and clocking your PCV bungs and PCV hose. I put a little bit of dielectric grease to make the hose slip on a little bit easier. Once the hose is in place and you have your clamp over the top of the hose, use a pair of dikes and go ahead and clamp it in place so it's permanently adhered to the AN fitting. Now that you have the lower intake pipe aligned, go ahead and pop the heat shield out. You might be asking why. It'll make sense once you start mounting this top pipe. Next, you're going to go ahead and tighten your top T-bolt clamp on the turbo coupler. Then move to your top T-bolt clamps here and here, and tighten them until they're snug. Next, we're going to go ahead and install your mass airflow sensors. Make sure the mass airflow sensor that was on the driver's side ends up back in the driver's side. There's been a few instances where customers have installed the wrong mass airflow sensor on the wrong pipe. So one of the steps you may want to do when you take everything out of the box and pull the OEM intake out is put these in first before anything else so you don't get confused. Or mark them with a colored Sharpie so you know which side belongs to which side. Make sure this is left unclipped until the whole install is done. Be your last step, putting in the clips over the mass airflow sensor. Your next step is going to be putting the male catch can PCV fitting into the female GM OEM PCV fitting. There's a couple ways that you can route this, either up the service lines, in through the harness, and over to the bung, or you can go underneath your driver side intake, wrap it over, insert it, clip it in, and it will sit nice and free, giving it good movement, but it will be secure and it will stay out of the way of all the pulleys and stay in one location through the life of the car. Alright, our next step is going to be installing our very last piece of the intake system. Make sure that the arrows point in the direction of vacuum. So in other words, if the turbocharger is on the passenger side of the car and it's pulling in this direction, the arrows need to be pulling in the direction of the airflow. Make sure your mass airflow sensor is the right side for each side of the car, so passenger versus driver. Make sure that the mass airflow sensors fit perfectly and you can get the hex heads in place. Once you have this in the right direction with the right mass airflow sensor, put your hex heads in each hole, tighten them down snugly. Your next step is getting the last pipe in place. Keep both band clamps very loose so you can still move it around, rotate it. Ultimately, you're going to want both mass airflow sensors to be in line with each other and at the same angle. Our next step is going to be putting in the heat shield. But before you put it in, take each clamp off the air filters, put them over each individual intake pipe. This will make it a little bit easier for you to get each individual intake in place. Now put in your heat shield. Next, we're going to go ahead and install the AEM dry filters. Once you have the filter on, go ahead and look at your spacing. Make sure you don't need to make any adjustments right here inside the flex joint. Once you have it at the spec location or where you desire it to be, go ahead and tighten down both your teeth bolts. Next step, we're going to go ahead and put our electrical fittings for both of our mass airflow sensors and connect our PCV. Make sure to lock each one of them in. Gray and purple on top, black and red on the bottom. The very last step is going to be installing the MAP sensor into the MAP bung. Make sure you use a little bit of dielectric grease to make sure that the seal doesn't rip. Don't over tighten this, you'll strip the bung. One other thing to be aware of is that sometimes the MAP cord that goes to the MAP sensor is wrapped behind these electrical wires. In some cases on 2017s, you may need to take these off in order to get enough room in order to reach it to the MAP bung. Alright guys, there's the install video for you on how to get the intake into the car with the catch can. If you run into any issues, you can either contact us directly or you can message us through Facebook or Instagram, or schedule a time that I can walk through it with you step by step on FaceTime. Alright guys, I'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, it's me, James Renick from Renick Performance. Keep a few things in mind when using our parts. One, they're all off-highway use only and not legal in the state of California. All performance parts on 2016 plus GM cars require a tune. Make sure your engine is running healthy. Go to a reputable tuner. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call directly or contact us on Facebook. Have a great day.